I want to welcome everybody here tonight. This is a great crowd. We thank you for coming. I want to thank the staff at the Circle of Arts, who every year have made this possible, and they design a great layout of our images. I think there's 68 images displayed here tonight from members and non-members. So after we're done talking, please spend a little time and look around. I also want to thank our own board, John Doskich, Sharon Hemme, Rebecca Ray, and Gay Hott, who have all contributed to making this a memorable evening and a show for the next 2 weeks. So you can come back at any time in the next 2 weeks and see this again. I wanted to point out there's a memorial on the way in as you walk in the door on the left. We lost a valuable friend and fellow photographer in May. He died unexpectedly. He was a board member and he was a wonderful photographer. So if you can, take a minute and take a look at that. Our featured tribute tonight is our founder and former member, Mike Schlitt, and we're going to get into that a little bit. But John is going to try to introduce our juror for tonight and give you just a little taste of what he'll do. Get in the camera.
Okay. Well, anyway, welcome. I just want to introduce you to our juror. His name is Steve Jessmore. And Steve, if you want to just raise your hand there. We're really fortunate to have, we're very fortunate to have Steve. Steve comes with a long list of photographical accomplishments, I would say. He's been a photojournalist for 30 years. He's a 5-time winner of Photographer of the Year in Michigan. He's been a photojournalist for newspapers like the Saginaw News, let's see, Myrtle Beach Sun, right? And one other one, Flint Journal. And he was also the chief photographer for CMU. And so lots of experience, lots of talent, and we're really fortunate to have him help us out as a juror here. So, and just a couple more things about Steve. He's now working as a freelance photographer, and when COVID hit and things slowed down a little bit, he decided that he wanted to explore wildlife photography, which is one of my passions. And in particular, he likes birds. And since Steve has a place on Torch River, not too far from here, he got out and he'd do some wildlife photography. And then he decided to enter the National Audubon Bird Photography Competition last year. National competition. So Steve, being a relatively new bird photographer, actually took first place. Oh, and honorable mention, so 2 of his images won in the professional category. So that's really quite an accomplishment, I would say. So Steve will enlighten us on his selections when that time comes. We're not quite there yet, but we wanted to introduce Steve and thank him. And I also want to mention that Craig Sturkin is here and standing next to Steve. And Craig was our juror last year, and he did a great job. And thumbs up to you, Craig. So, okay.
Good. Thanks, John. I want to point out the special display here, which is a tribute to Mike Schlitt, who was the founder of this club back in 2009. He was not only the founder, but he inspired a number of people and got them started with photography. The club didn't have a budget, so he spent his own money, and he gathered a group together, and slowly the club grew. And fortunately, I was able to learn from Mike. He was a kind of a mentor to me. So we've kind of set up this little tribute area for Mike. These are 3 of his images that you can review. If you were touched in some way by Mike, over the years. There's a card here where you can make a good wish to him, because we'll send this to him. There's also an image I took of Mike on the beach at Lake Michigan a few years ago in his typical stance, standing in the water with his rubber boots on, taking a photo. That's typical Mike. So take a look at this and sign the card if you can. Oh, I wanted to also thank our sponsor, Charlevoix Auto, here in town. That's the Jeep Chevy dealer on the south side of town. They made a contribution to the Charlevoix Circle of Arts on our behalf, and they are the sole sponsor for this event. So we hope in the next 2 weeks you come back. Yeah, for sure. And I think with that, we'll let Steve take over. He can talk as much or as little as he wants, and he can walk us around the gallery or whatever he chooses to do. But he can announce the winners as well. Get in the camera here a minute.
In the camera? How's that? Thank you for having me. It was really fun to come up here. You know, I'm close by. I'm on Torch River. It's fun to see Northern Michigan art. It's always a community journalist, so to me it's really fun to see community pictures, no matter what your community is. You know, like, where do I start? John, you did a great job summing it all up. And you know, I've always been a photographer. I started when I was 14 in high school. My dad owned Saginaw Photo Supply. I was around photography. My dad actually, which is really weird because I never think about it, he used to shoot bird pictures in the Everglades in the 60s. 16 millimeter film. I never liked film, video, or anything like that. I was always kind of a still guy. Never thought I'd be a photographer. But in high school, I made my living doing concerts for the Saginaw News. I was 15. By the time I got out of high school, I did over 100 concerts just by telling them I could do it and showing them some pictures, and they got me in for free, and it was really a wonderful childhood photographing Queen and Bob Seger and everybody, you name it nowadays, classic rock that we all love. So, I mean, that was really a fun career, but I went into school for pre-med and pre-dent, and hated it. And, you know, I took one photojournalism class with 21 credits my second semester, and always been a go-getter, just, you know, wanting to get stuff done and do it. And I just loved the photojournalism, and so fell into it, and nobody ever told me I'd make 18,000 instead of 100,000 or whatever it was when I got out, but I did, and I loved my whole life. And, you know, it was wonderful. I worked in my hometown for, you know, 15 years in the Saginaw News. I went back, finally got a job after the big recession back in the 80s, and it's just been a wonderful career to tell stories in my community and around me. Had a lot of offers to go big to big papers, New York, Chicago, you know, DC, Florida, but I'd never really wanted to do that. I wanted to raise my family, and, you know, we have 3 kids, and it was just what I wanted to do. I love Michigan, and so I followed my heart, and I figured I could do what I did better where I was than going somewhere else that was going to make me have to drive in for an hour every day and you know, travel, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be home and in my community. So, and I never thought that was a cop-out. I always thought that was a good thing, you know, and I fought that my whole life, you know, where you're not an expert until you leave home and come back again, sort of thing. But I was able to win Photographer of the Year 4 times in my hometown in a row, 4 years in a row, which I thought was really, you know, for me, it's not about winning, but it was just that sense of accomplishment, you know, in my hometown like that. So I've had a great career, and, you know, again, as a photojournalist, and then university photographer, got recruited back to go to my alma mater. I taught at CMU for 7 years for the photojournalism program. You know, so I've always been associated with photography, and it's been wonderful, and I still have a passion for it. It's not work. You know, every day what I do is just fun and creative, and it gives me an outlet. Had a lot of art background as a kid in school. photojournalism, you have a lot more rigid guidelines to work with. You can't, you can create, but you can't create situations to create. So you have to create what's around you and as it happens. And I still go by those standards now doing wildlife photography. Quite honestly, I don't ever bait. I don't, try to get a bird to fly. I don't do anything that I think is unethical. I try to just, kind of be in synergy. Again, love what I do. I never really shot bird pictures, quite honestly, until about July, August. I went through my pictures actually Thursday from the first year, 2020. I started seeing birds pop up in about August and in July of 2020. And I have I'll give myself a leg up where I had a big photo, like kind of skill set with making moments. I photographed a lot of pro sports in Detroit. I photographed, news situations, spot news situations in Flint for years on the streets, and dangerous situations. And so, I realize how important it is to stay engaged with for your safety's sake and to make a picture. If you're hiding, you're not going to make that picture. And so I just really love, photographing moments. And 2020, COVID hit, all of us were affected, and, me no different than anybody else. My wife sat me down after about a month and said, all my freelance work got canceled. She's like, man, you have to do something, different than just sit and watch videos of how to be a better photographer or whatever. But, God put us on this earth. Every day's a blessing. Make every day count. You have to figure out what you always wanted to do and do it. And I have married the most wonderful woman, I tell you. All you guys are probably great too, but she's really, really great. So my second time around was wonderful. But she's so in support, and she told me that, and I'm like, that's great, but I don't know what I want to do, And I came up here, I'd been up here for years and never photographed birds, and I finally, just started getting in the kayak, which I had never done. I got a kayak, I started going in the river, the ducks started flying over me. I couldn't get pictures of them, and I said, game on, this is my, as a photojournalist, we always had to bring back the page one picture the next day. You never could come back and say, well, nothing was happening. I don't have any pictures today. That, and you couldn't create the picture. You just had to stay engaged and make these pictures. So, honest to God, I'd be sitting out there, and the migration started in late August, September, and I'm in my kayak, and they're flying above my head, and no warning, and it's dark out, and I thought, this is really fun, this is a challenge, and I'm not going to get beat. And so I started photographing the ducks, and I loved it, and I started branching out a little bit, and I went to Kensington, and I went Shiawassee Refuge near Saginaw a little bit, and I just started making pictures. And I didn't really know, knew nothing about birds, and I knew about what I was doing, but I knew nothing about birds. And I was struggling with old equipment. I had Canon gear from the early 2000s that I used for freelancing, but it just needed to be updated. And so I started asking around, and what I want to tell you all is that it's not totally the gear. I got some good pictures with the gear I had, but I ended up locking on a Sony A9 II and a 200 to 600 zoom. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try this combo out and just see how I do. I shot both the Audubon winning pictures with that combination. So I didn't have the 600 f4s and the 400 2.8s and all that at that time. And, it's about equipment, but it's more about just being out, knowing your equipment, and knowing how to use your equipment, and how to use it in relation to what you're trying to photograph. And I think that's what I learned, the most. I didn't buy, this will sound really weird, but I didn't even buy the Sony equipment till December 28th of 2020. I shot the one Audubon winning picture January 5th of 2020 on the first time out with the camera. And the hawk and the chipmunk I shot the first day. But I spent 2.5 hours with the hawk, following the hawk through the woods in the middle of the winter in the afternoon when it was almost dark out. 2.5 hours with the same bird, and shooting thousands of pictures, and ended up with that one picture. So it's not really, it was lucky to a point, but it's not really luck when you spend that much time and you have so many situations half of which I missed because I didn't know how to use my camera. I shot the other one about a month later, in Muskegon in the countryside, out of my car window, the cardinal picture that won first place. And we were talking earlier, I was talking with Wally, you turn off the heat, and you learn that the heat waves will affect the lens, and you get the car to feel as cold as it was outside, which was like 0 degrees, and you just turn it on to inch forward and use it as a blind, and I still do a lot of photography that way. But, again, my point being, it's not all equipment. It does help. I think the most important thing is you just have to put in the time, and that's what I did for the year of 2020. I have a folder system that I use every day that I go shoot and label it with a date. I have in the last 3 years filled up 3 8-terabyte hard drives with images of birds that I'm shooting in my spare time, by the way. I still work freelancing full time. And then another, I've bought Synology and trying to make sense of the whole thing. But it's the time you shoot, you edit, you go into your edit and say, why did you do that? And how come it's blurry? Well, it's blurry because it's a small bird, and wow, I used a 25th, 2,500th of a second. That's not fast enough to stop a small bird. Next time I'm going to try a 4,000th of a second. That's not fast enough next time. So you learn and you store it away. And the other day I shot a phoebe diving for a bug on the water. I shot a 1/12,800th of a second before I got that bird to stop. Doesn't seem possible, does it? I've been doing this 40-some years. It doesn't seem possible, but it was the case as I inched through. So it's all about shooting, looking at your pictures, being constructively criticizing and kind of being harsh with yourself. I told Craig and I were talking about this earlier, but your kids all think you take great pictures. Your wife says, you take the best pictures. My wife says the same thing, and I know she's right some of the time, but not all the time. We have to be honest with ourselves and just say, look, how am I going to get better? Whether it's taking pictures or making widgets or whatever it is, it's investing the time, reinvesting time to criticize ourselves, ask other people their advice, enter shows. This is a huge step, and I applaud everybody that entered the show. Just to enter the show, you're putting yourself out there. It's a wonderful thing. And, but we need to do that, and then we need to do it again tomorrow. And we need to do it the next day. And the next day you have off. And Craig and I got up this morning. We were here to judge at 10 o'clock, but I got up at 5:30 and sat out on the riverbank. And the stuff we saw, like this morning, I saw deer cross the river. I saw an eagle get chased. I saw 4 groups of Canada geese with goslings. I noticed the mute swan had 4 babies, and she had 5 last night. She only had 4 this morning. Nature is cruel. Nature is all around us. We just have to kind of watch it. But the one last thing I'm going to do before I talk about pictures, what I do, and this I've developed through the years, I had to figure out a way to teach it, to average photographers, and to new photographers like students when I taught. And the analogy that I use is like to make a better picture, it's like climbing a ladder. All right, so you have the base level, your feet are on the floor. Before you lift your feet off the floor, that picture's got to be well exposed, in focus, sharp. You have to learn the apertures and the shutter speeds and how they work together, whether the depth of field works with the subject you're trying to do, with what you're trying to say. That's just basic for me. So when I looked at pictures, that's kind of basic, before I start taking that next step. And then I have the whole wow factor thing. And at this stage of my life, like each step has a wow factor, and I'm just going to read off some, but like to climb up the next step might be great light. Okay, does your picture have great light? Did you take advantage of early in the day or late in the day? Indirect light, cloudy light, did you make the best of it? Whatever the light is, you can make, great light can be a lot of different kinds of light. It doesn't have to be morning and evening only. But how about layering? Think about composition. Your composition, does your photo say something in the foreground and background, or are they distracting? Does it hurt the picture or help the picture? With how you compose your picture. And what we call layering, against that background, helping out something out of focus maybe where it's not distracting but attractive. How's your storytelling? Does your picture have a message? What message are you trying to say with your picture? It might just be that it's happy, or sad, or just calm, or a million things. I like to, because I'm a photojournalism person, I like my messages to be more like what kind of life is going on, with my birds, rather than having them not say anything. But are they hunting for food? Are they taking care of babies? Are they protecting territory? Are they interacting with other birds? I like to make it more complex, and I think to me more complex helps me get up the ladder quicker and make that step a big kind of wow. Originality is a huge thing. Have I seen this before? Is this my view on this? Somebody told me when I first started bird photography, they said, hey, you're really taking some nice pictures, but why don't you look at this guy down in Detroit. He was in the top 100 of Audubon. I said, is that good? Honestly, I didn't know. To be in the top 100 of Audubon, is that a good thing? It sounds okay. He goes, oh yeah, that's really great. And I said, okay. So I looked at his pictures and I thought, all right, it's everything I would have thought, a nice clean background and nice low angle and, a very beautiful picture, sharp, all the things I've told you about before. But I thought, that's not the way I want to shoot bird pictures. I want to be a Steve Jessmore picture, whatever that Steve Jessmore picture is, whether good or bad. I want to be happy with that. So I want you to do whatever your name is, kind of pictures. How would you shoot it, just to let free? The whole category over there, what was it called? The creative artistic expression or something. It's a perfect category for that. I would like to have seen, my first comment, I would have liked to have seen some of the other ones from some of these other categories in that category. Because they are, while they're great landscapes or flowers, it might have, they were abstract maybe more and would have rose to the top, like in this other category, maybe, But that uniqueness and originality, and, again, the whole wow factor. The first time you look at a picture, is it like, wow, I wish I shot that. Wow, it jumps off the page at me. It does whatever. It's just really excellent, and then until you have to start picking it apart. A really excellent picture, hopefully you don't have to pick apart. As a judge, it's kind of a horrible experience. I want to let you all know to have to pick pictures apart. But to me, that's part of my philosophy, is I look at things to help separate pictures from other pictures, and you have to have some kind of a way to do that, and that's how I do it day in and day out. So I hope that helps a little bit. I'd be glad to. I thought we had a lot of really great pictures. I thought the bird category, I thought the floral category, the landscapes were especially strong. Those were my favorites. The first places in all those categories I just love. The second, I thought they were deep. There were a lot of images that were beautiful. I've never done this, John or Mark. You want me to walk around? What would you like me to do? What would you guys like me to do? You want to ask questions?
Yeah, Steve, I think it would be appropriate for you to walk around the areas. We got prize money to give to the winners that you've chosen. Right. But I made a big mistake. I got to roll back a little bit. We had another guest that was going to talk as part of the tribute to Mike Schlitt.
Oh.
So give us a couple minutes.
Absolutely. I'm here all night.
As you can tell, I think it's very valuable to listen to Steve and his tips and his advice on taking photos. So what I forgot to do as part of the Mike Schlitt tribute was have Bob Walker come and make a few words. Bob, a good friend of Mike's.
Thank you. Well, I am not Mike Schlitt. There's only one Mike Schlitt, and I'm not a stand-in for him. But I've done a lot of photography and been a lot of places and done a lot of things with him, and he's a fabulous guy. I know Mike wanted to be here in the worst way, but he had family commitments that he didn't feel right to pick up and leave, and he's absolutely right. Family always comes first. But like probably a lot of you, Mike had a tremendous impact on me getting started in photography. In 2009, that's when the club started. I think I had just retired, and I was trying to figure out what am I going to do. I enjoyed photography. I had kind of crappy stuff, but Mike says, hey, I can help you out, and he can, and he did. And like anyone who knows Mike, has been out with him, he pushes you. He pushes you, pushes you. If you, what's the saying? You can't take pictures in your bedroom, laying down, or couch, or whatever. You got to get out and make stuff happen, and that's exactly what Mike did. And he's just a fabulous person. Is still a fabulous person. I'm trying to think of going forward and not backwards. Mike is in Seneca, South Carolina. They're in the process of moving down there. They're building a house. We've happened to see them a couple times. He's got a great place. And in fact, last time I was down, probably a month ago, he took us to a very similar setting as this that is put a program, a juried show together. And he says, you know, this doesn't compare anything like what we had in Charlevoix, does it? So, you know, I mean, and that's coming from a critic, and Mike is very much a critic, but he was absolutely right. They got potential, and it's not going to be very long before Mike, he's already scouting out. He knows where all the waterfalls are in South Carolina, North Carolina, and that's just the kind of guy he was. One of the other things that Mike did was got us involved in various trips. Matter of fact, one of them, and I've probably been on at least a dozen trips with Mike, and we had one particular group. This was in Yosemite in October of 2016. And Ed, I see Ed and Suzanne and Carol and Wally back there. There were quite a few people on that trip, and we had a great time. It was led by Gary Hart, who's a professional, and we just had a ball. And we, I think we kind of flustered the teacher, Gary Hart, a little bit, because there was a pretty good interest in knowledge of photography even before we started out. But and I credit Mike to doing that. But that's just one example of what Mike did. And I think we all owe him a lot. I know they really struggled whether to stay here or go down. They got kids down in the southern area, and I think maybe having to do with a little warm weather more often is probably something to do with it. But we're going to miss Mike. He's a fabulous person, and I know he'd love anybody that's down in South Carolina to come and see him. And I think we owe him a lot. Let's give him a big applause.
Hey,
So thank you, Mike. Okay.
thanks, Bob.